My son transferred my house into his name while I was recovering from surgery. He told the neighbors I wasn't coming back. Then I came home and found a locksmith changing my locks. I'm 73 years old. I've lived in the same house on Clover Street for 31 years. I painted that kitchen myself, twice. I planted the rose bush by the front gate the summer my husband passed, and every June it blooms whether anyone tends it or not. That house is not just property to me. It's the place where I became who I am. So when I tell you what my son did, what he actually did, with paperwork and signatures and a notary stamp, I need you to understand what he was really taking. His name is Russell. He's 46 years old. He has my husband's eyes and, I now know, a stranger's heart. It started with my hip. I'd been putting off the replacement surgery for 2 years because I hate hospitals and I thought I could manage. I couldn't. By last February, I could barely get from the bedroom to the bathroom without gripping the wall, and my doctor sat me down and said, very gently, that waiting any longer was only going to make the recovery harder. So I agreed. I scheduled the surgery for the first week of March and arranged to spend my recovery at a rehabilitation facility about 40 minutes from home. The kind of place with physical therapists and meal service and people who check on you at night. My doctor said 6 weeks minimum, possibly 8. Russell drove me to the hospital the morning of the surgery. He held my hand before they wheeled me back. He said, "Don't worry about anything, Mom. I've got everything handled." I believed him. I want to be fair to the person I thought he was. He had been a reliable son for most of his adult life. Not warm exactly. Russell was never the kind of person who called just to talk, but dependable in a practical way. He paid his bills. He showed up when I asked. When his father was sick, Russell was the one who dealt with the insurance companies and the hospital billing department because I couldn't hold those conversations without falling apart. I trusted him with things because he had earned that trust, slowly, over decades. 2 years before my surgery, I had given him power of attorney. My doctor had recommended it, just in case something happens and someone needs to make decisions quickly, and Russell was the obvious choice. My daughter Maureen lives in Portland and has 3 young children. My younger son, Derek, has struggled with addiction for years, and I love him. But I would not hand him a pen near a legal document. Russell was steady. Russell was here, so I signed the papers, and I didn't think about them again. I should have thought about them. The rehabilitation facility was called Sunrise Glen. It sounds nicer than it was, but the staff were kind and the physical therapist, a young woman named Becca, was genuinely skilled and got me walking properly again within 3 weeks. I was a good patient. I did my exercises. I called Maureen every Sunday. I did not call Russell as often because he had told me he was busy with a construction project and I didn't want to bother him. He called me twice in 6 weeks. Both times he asked how I was feeling, and both times he got off the phone in under 4 minutes. I remember thinking that was a little cold. I told myself he just wasn't comfortable with illness. I had made excuses for Russell's coldness his whole life. On a Thursday in mid-April, Becca said I was ready to go home. I was so happy I cried a little right there in the physical therapy room, and she pretended not to notice. I called a car service because I didn't want to bother Russell on a weekday, and I rode home watching the familiar streets go by, feeling that particular relief you only feel after a long time away. The relief of almost home. The driver pulled up in front of my house at 2:15 in the afternoon. I noticed immediately that the rosebush had not been trimmed. I noticed that the mailbox was overflowing. And then I noticed the man crouched at my front door with a toolbox beside him, doing something to the lock. I thought at first he was a repairman. I thought maybe Russell had sent someone to fix something while I was away. I got my walker out of the trunk and I made my way up the front walk and I said, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" He looked up. He was maybe 30, wearing a gray jacket with a small logo on the chest. He said, "Ma'am, are you a neighbor?" "I'm the owner," I said. This is my house. He stood up slowly. Something shifted in his face that I didn't like. He said, I have a work order here. He pulled out a folded paper. Change of ownership as of April 3rd. I've been hired by a Mr. Russell Beckett. I stood there on my own front path, and the words didn't go in right away. They sat on the surface of my mind like water on wax. I'm sorry, I said. What did you say? He held the paper out. I took it. It had Russell's name on it. It had my address on it. It had a date 3 weeks earlier. It said owner, and it said Russell J. Beckett, and my name was not on it anywhere. I don't remember exactly what I said next. I think I said something like, there must be a mistake, and he said something like, I'm just doing my job, and I think I sat down on the front step because my legs had decided they were done for the day. The locksmith stood there looking uncomfortable, and eventually he said he was going to have to complete the work order unless I had documentation showing otherwise. And I said, please don't. Please wait. I need to make a phone call. I called Russell. He answered on the third ring. I said, Russell, I'm at the house. There's a man here changing the locks. What is going on? There was a pause. A specific kind of pause, not surprised, not confused, prepared. He said, Mom, I was going to call you this week. You were going to call me. I've been dealing with some financial issues. The house. I had to use it to secure something. It's complicated. I can't explain. Russell. My voice came out very quiet. Did you transfer this house into your name? Another pause. Then, I have POA, Mom. Everything I did was legal. I have thought about those words many times since that afternoon. Everything I did was legal. Not, I'm sorry. Not, let me explain. Not even, I know this is a shock. Just the quiet assertion of legality, as though that were the same as right. I told him to come to the house. He said he was at work. I said I didn't care. Come to the house. He said we could talk about it this weekend. I said if he didn't come to the house right now, I would be calling a lawyer before the day was out. He came. While I waited, the locksmith finished his work and left me a new key. He was apologetic and kind, and I could see he felt terrible about the whole thing. And I thanked him because it wasn't his fault. Then I sat in my own living room and looked around at the furniture I'd chosen, and the curtains I'd hung, and the small framed photo of my late husband on the side table. And I tried to understand what exactly had happened to my life. Russell arrived 40 minutes later. He came in without knocking with the new key. That small thing, coming into my house with a key he had arranged for himself, landed on me like a stone. He sat down across from me. He was wearing his work clothes, a button-down shirt, and he had the expression he used to get as a teenager when he'd been caught at something. Not remorseful exactly, but calculating how much he needed to admit. I asked him to explain everything, from the beginning. It took almost an hour to get the full picture, and I had to pull most of it out of him piece by piece. The short version was this. Russell had accumulated significant debt over the past 3 years. Bad investments, a failed business venture with a partner who had apparently taken most of the money, and a second mortgage on his own condo that he could no longer service. He had been looking at my house, my paid-off, fully owned house, as an asset he could leverage. Using the power of attorney I had given him, he had, while I was in the rehabilitation facility, transferred the deed into his name. He had used the house as collateral for a loan. He had not told me. He had not asked me. He had waited until I was 40 minutes away, recovering from surgery, and he had done it. Did you think I was never coming home? I asked him. He looked at his hands. I thought I'd have it figured out by the time you got back. Figured out, I said. Russell, that is my house. That is where I intend to live until I die. What exactly did you think you were going to figure out? He didn't have a good answer. He had several bad ones. He said he'd planned to transfer it back once the loan was paid. He said he had been under enormous pressure and he hadn't been thinking clearly. He said he was sorry, in the way people say sorry when they mean I'm sorry I got caught. And then, this is the part I keep coming back to. He said, "Mom, I didn't think you'd notice right away. I didn't think you'd notice right away." I was 73 years old, and my own son thought that I might be too old, too slow, too diminished to notice that my home had been transferred out from under me. That was the moment something closed in me that has not reopened. I told Russell to leave. He argued, briefly, and then he left. I sat in my living room for a long time. Then I picked up the phone and I called my friend Constance, who has been my closest friend for 27 years and whose husband is a retired attorney. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Honey, call Lawrence first thing tomorrow morning." Lawrence is her husband. "Tonight, don't touch anything. Don't sign anything, just sit." I sat. The next morning, I met with Lawrence, who was generous enough to give me 2 hours of his time and refer me to a colleague of his who specialized in elder law and real estate. Her name was Gloria Chen, and she had an office downtown. And when I laid out the whole situation, she listened without interrupting, and then she said, "This is a serious case. What he did may have been technically permissible under a broad power of attorney, but there are strong grounds to challenge it. Misuse of fiduciary duty, failure to act in the principal's interest, potentially elder financial abuse under state statute." That last phrase, elder financial abuse, settled over me strangely. I had heard that term before in the context of strangers, of news stories, of other people. Not in the context of my son. Not in the context of the boy I had raised and fed and worried over for 46 years. But there it was. Gloria filed an emergency motion to freeze any further transactions on the property while the case was being reviewed. That went through within 48 hours. Then began the longer process. Documentation, depositions, the careful dismantling of what Russell had built with my signature and my trust. Through all of it, Russell maintained that he had acted legally. He had a lawyer too, a younger man who kept using the phrase proper use of agency authority in a way that made Gloria visibly tired. What Russell's lawyer could not get around was the fundamental requirement that a power of attorney must be used in the interest of the person who granted it, not in the interest of the agent. Not to solve the agent's financial problems. In my interest. In mine. We also learned during discovery that Russell had cashed out a small investment account of mine, about $11,000 during the same period. He had deposited it into his own account. He claimed this was also a legitimate use of the POA. His lawyer did not look entirely convinced when he said this. Maureen flew in from Portland the week after I contacted Gloria. She was furious. A clean, cold fury that I recognized as the family temper. And she sat across from Russell at the family meeting I insisted on and said, very clearly, "You stole from our mother while she was in a rehab facility after surgery. I don't care what the paperwork says. You know what you did." Russell said she was being dramatic. She told him she was done with him until he made it right. She has kept that position. Derek called me from somewhere in New Mexico, where he'd apparently been for several months, and cried on the phone. He kept saying, "I would never, Mom, I would never." And I believed him, and also found it a little painful that the son I had spent 30 years worrying about was the one calling to comfort me, while the son I had trusted was the one who had done this. The case took 4 months to resolve. It did not go to full trial. Russell, faced with the documented evidence and Gloria's clear-eyed assessment of how a jury would respond to a man who had transferred his elderly mother's home while she recovered from hip surgery, agreed to a settlement. The deed was returned to my name. The $11,000 was repaid with interest. The loan he had taken against the property was dissolved. He had to find other means to address his debt, which I understand is still not fully resolved. He did not go to jail. I want to be honest about my feelings on that point because I think they are more complicated than simple anger. Part of me wanted criminal prosecution. Gloria told me the civil route was more certain, that criminal elder abuse cases are hard to prosecute and often result in plea deals with minimal consequences, and she was probably right. But there is a part of me, a smaller, older part, that also could not entirely bear the thought of my son in handcuffs, even after everything. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe it just says I'm a mother. The settlement required Russell to pay my legal fees. It did not require him to apologize. He never has. Not in any real way. He sent a text message the week after the settlement was signed that said, "I hope you're doing okay." I looked at those words for a long time, and then I set the phone down and went to tend to the rosebush, which had gotten overgrown while I wasn't watching. I'm still in my house on Clover Street. I still wake up in the same bedroom I've slept in for 31 years. I still have the photograph of my husband on the side table and the curtains I chose and the kitchen I painted myself. Russell's key no longer works. I had the locks changed the week after the settlement by a different locksmith, a woman who was very efficient and asked no questions. My attorney helped me draw up a new power of attorney document. It names Maureen as my agent, with very specific and limited scope. It explicitly states that no real property transactions are permitted. Gloria reviewed it twice. I had a different attorney review it after that. I do not know if I will ever fully trust anyone with legal authority over my affairs again. I think that is probably a reasonable response to what happened, and I have stopped trying to talk myself out of it. What I want to say to anyone listening, anyone who has a parent, or who is a parent, or who is just a person who might one day be old and dependent on someone else's honesty, is this: a power of attorney is not a formality. It is not just paperwork you sign to make your doctor feel better. It is a real and significant transfer of authority, and it can be used against you by someone you love, and it can be done cleanly and legally and with your own signature on the document that enables it. Know who you are trusting. Know what you are signing. And don't let anyone make you feel like asking those questions is paranoid or unkind. I'm 73 years old. I take a long walk every morning, weather permitting. My hip is fine. The rosebush by the front gate bloomed this June like it always does. No one had to tend it, it just bloomed because that's what it does. And I stood at the front window with my coffee and looked at it and thought, I'm still here. That's enough. That's more than enough. I want to thank everyone who has shared their own stories in the comments. I read every one of them. You're not alone in this, and neither am I. If this happened to you or someone you love, please talk to an elder law attorney before you do anything else. Most offer a free initial consultation. You have more options than you think. Take care of yourselves. I've thought a lot about how this happened. Not just the legal mechanics of it, the deed transfer, the power of attorney, the loan, but the deeper question of how a person gets to the place where they can do something like this to their own mother. Russell didn't wake up one morning and decide to be a thief. That's what I've come to understand, and it doesn't make what he did any less wrong, but it helps me see it clearly. He got there slowly, one small compromise at a time, one rationalization building on another, until the thing he was considering, taking his mother's house while she recovered from surgery, felt, in his mind, manageable. Temporary. Fixable later. People don't usually fall all at once. They slide, and I played a part in that too. Not in what he did. I want to be clear about that. But in the conditions that allowed him to believe he could do it. I trusted without verifying. I signed documents without fully understanding their scope. I made excuses for his coldness for decades because it was easier than confronting it. I handed a man with a character I had never fully examined a legal instrument that gave him significant power over my life. That was my mistake, and I own it. There's a kind of wisdom that only comes from being genuinely hurt by someone you trusted completely. It doesn't arrive gently. It arrives the way mine did, standing on a front path with a locksmith's work order in your hand, reading your son's name where your own should be. That's when you understand at a cellular level that trust is not a feeling. It's a conclusion you reach after careful observation. I had skipped the observation part. I won't do that again. What Russell did had consequences. Real, legal, financial ones. The deed came back to me. The money was repaid. His reputation, in the small circle of people who know what happened, is not what it was. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because actions move in one direction and then they keep moving and eventually they land somewhere, and where they land is not always where the person intended. Russell thought he was solving a problem. What he was actually doing was dismantling something that took 46 years to build and cannot be rebuilt. That's the cost he didn't calculate. Maureen flew in from Portland without being asked twice. Constance answered the phone on the first ring and had her husband's number ready. The people who showed up for me when I needed them most were the people I had never given a reason to doubt me. There is a lesson in that about where to place your energy and your trust as you get older. I'm still here. My house is still mine. The rosebush bloomed this June and I was standing at the window when it did. That's not a small thing. That's everything. If you are older and someone is asking you to sign something, anything, slow down. Ask questions. Get a second opinion from someone with no stake in your answer. Your caution is not an insult to anyone who deserves your trust. And if someone is made uncomfortable by your careful questions, that discomfort is information worth having. Take care of yourselves and take care of your paperwork.